Hello, viewers, and welcome to Spotlight. And we are always glad when you join us. And thank you also for your feedback that really helps us as we continue to bring this production to you. Again, keep engaging us. And on this edition of Spotlight, we are having a commentary that focuses on three things. First, we want to give appreciation to those people who are working very hard in this lockdown season. Also would want to look at creative approaches or creative responses that people are giving in this season around the world. And also come back home to our Kenyan church. How do we serve better? How can we be able to be a better church, again, informed by this season? Thank you again and welcome to this commentary. And we begin with appreciations to people who are serving greatly in this season. We want to appreciate the healthcare workers as we go through this valley of COVID-19. Now, Pope Francis recently referred to doctors and healthcare workers as the new prophets. They are daily on the front line, fatigued but still reporting every day to duty. Their families are making huge sacrifices, letting them out every day to save our lives and to save the lives of others. Sometimes the healthcare workers have to be in isolation, which has a huge emotional price. Some healthcare workers have even died on duty. All you healthcare workers, we appreciate you greatly. We also want to appreciate the security officers. And sometimes, especially here in Kenya, we rush to minimize them. But let's look at the good that they render to us to keep order. They wake up every day ready for danger. We go to them in police stations looking for solutions. They are awake at night to make sure we sleep well. Their families live on the edge, praying for a safe return of a spouse, a safe return of a parent, a safe return of a brother, a sister. And for perspective, there are so many good-hearted, committed, sacrificing, God-fearing security officers, many more than you actually might think. And for you all, security officers, we really appreciate you. We want to appreciate here government officials. The burden is on their shoulders to think up and execute measures that will bring the corona situation under control. They are often anxious. They stay awake at night. They must keep a restless nation at ease. They have to deal with emotions of failed strategies. They have pressure from every side. High expectations are placed on them, yet they are as human as all of us. For all your positive efforts, government officials, God bless you, we appreciate you. We appreciate all persons who are directly involved in dealing with the corona pandemic. You are agents of God to bring good to His people, and your efforts are not in vain. And here in Kenya, as we have the pandemic on one hand, we now have floods on the other. And we want to appreciate all the relief workers who work to give practical hope to people in crisis. They daily work in places of devastation, hoping to bring a smile in the midst of many tears. To all of you relief workers, we appreciate you. And uniquely, we want to appreciate all politicians who have stayed focused on the people. Those politicians for whom it is not just power from the people, but power for the people. We appreciate those leaders who have remained sensitive to the season that the citizens are going through. We appreciate very much all the politicians who are rejoicing with the citizens when they are going through glad times, and feeling the citizens also when they are going through distress. We acknowledge that politician who sheds a tear in solidarity with a suffering Kenyan. We salute the one who boldly calls out the self-centered colleagues and tells them, "I'm ashamed of the glutton you have become." We appreciate every politician who has stayed people-focused and Wanjiku-friendly. Thank you to each one of you who has fought the good fight and overcome the temptation of the pride of power and has not given your soul to the money gods. We appreciate every politician who has been proud and bold to keep their voice when they could have hired it out or sold it at a price. We appreciate all of you who still believe that character is the currency of civility. May the likes of you multiply in our midst. May you and your families prosper on this path. And may there come a time when your type is all we have. Looking at around the world, we want to appreciate all the people who have shown extraordinary kindness by sharing their wealth, their time, their skills to assist those in need, especially in this season. Some have made very, very creative responses. And very memorable is the performance in Italy on top of the Cremona Hospital, a violin performance by Lena Yokoyama. She performs the inspiring track that comes from the classic movie The Mission, and her beautiful violin contrasts the gray air of sickness and death. Healthcare workers and patients who can look out of the windows, and others who crane their necks from the hospital gardens. They want to see what they can hear. Wonderful violin sound. And the violin strings that are played skillfully bring tears to many eyes. Even my own eyes, every time I watch that performance, I can't help but get teary, because the violin brings a tune of love, that even though we are lost in suffering, love is still present, that we do not go through this season alone. And in it all, there is a towering divine beauty that is strangely present even when life tears us to pieces. Now, when it comes to church buildings, around the world, churches have remained closed as part, of course, of the containment measures during this time of the corona pandemic. But according to an article in the New York Times, the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, an Anglican church in New York, has turned into an emergency hospital capable of holding at least 200 patients. What a pragmatic response! The church should have remained closed, but found a relevance that would make it remain open. And we all know that there is the argument that the church is not closed because it is in the hearts of the people, which is true. As long as Christians are open to the inspiration of Christ, the church is open. But this church, this cathedral, found a way of not only keeping the hearts open, but its doors open as well. It found a way of being at the heart of the solution to the prevailing pandemic. This is not just missional creativity. This is an absolute prophetic relevance. I want to imagine Jesus, who went into the temple of Jerusalem and drove out the money changers because they had turned the temple into a den of thieves. What do you think Jesus would do if he would find a church full of the sick, a church where nurses and doctors are rushing up and down, laboring to save lives? And I'll leave that to your imagination. But I'm thinking about the church here in Kenya. How can the buildings remain open? Now, many churches in Kenya are large and some of them have some fantastic utilities. And instead of the idle status they are in right now, can the church find a relevant purpose for such a time as this? This is for church leaders to ponder and also for history to register. And then to the passionate subject of reopening of churches. Now, some church leaders are passionately lobbying for the church buildings to reopen. I believe by asking for the reopening, the leaders mean that they want to reopen the sanctuaries and offer the spiritual services to their congregants, as well as reopen the programs that they offer on what we can call a regular season. There are three dimensions to this reopening. The first one is the dimension of care. That for the church to care for its members at this time, its doors need to be open so that it can create a form of space where its members can come for spiritual care. Now, one school of thought, prominent especially in neighboring Tanzania, is that more than ever, churches need to be open now. Now, this is even after South Korea tracks a resurgence of the corona infections to a church. The second dimension to the reopening is the dimension of identity. The church is feeling uncomfortable being described as a non-essential service. In its imagination, the church has always thought of itself as a critical service. Now, some pastors build a personal brand, a strong personal brand based on the premise that they are very important people. This until the government doesn't think so. So there is a crisis of image. Now, someone asked, if the sanctuaries were to remain closed, would there be a crisis in Kenya? There's a crisis in the school system, a crisis in the health system, a crisis in the economic system. With the sanctuaries closed, would there be a spiritual crisis? Now, again, I'll leave that for you to engage. One pastor told me, and I quote him, "The only one thing that is getting pastors' permission out of the city are barriers." Is that then the essential service of the church? Dealing with the dead? End of quote. And would say maybe if we did more with the living, would be more on the front line at such a time as this. The third dimension that is silent, but is a great motivation in this church reopening debate is the dimension of survival. There is a fear that the church may just die, that the members may be influenced by secular life and never return, that the members will learn to live without the gathering and therefore become indifferent and remain scattered. There is a fear that denominations may just die or strongly decline as members go to other churches. There is the fear that the church may die because of accumulated debt and incapacity to service the financial obligations in the form of loans for both the institutions and their clergy. There is a fear that the church may die as pastors, especially those who have a celebrity status, begin to struggle as their livelihoods and standards of living are lowered. Now, there's a fear that the church may die as it is clustered as a non-essential service. What does this mean? It means that its voice is downgraded and overtaken by what we might describe as essential sectors. There's a fear that the church may die as it is exposed as irrelevant and uninnovative, and therefore will not be taken seriously going forward. For this fear of survival, there is therefore the passionate need and the passionate appeal to reopen. Now, I overheard a conversation in a supermarket the other day, and I picked that it was a doctor and his pastor. They just bumped into each other in a supermarket. The pastor said, "I am so fatigued." The doctor responded, "Sorry, what have you been up to?" The pastor said, "I'm fatigued from this unending rest, just sitting at home." Well, the doctor said, "I'm fatigued too, from hours standing in theater." A church suffering from rest, clueless on how to respond at such a time as this. The concern is not even so much about when the church will reopen. The church is not, the issue so much is not when the church will reopen. The concern is which church will reopen. What type of church will reopen? And connected to this, my concern is also which pastors will be serving the reopened church. What type of pastors will be serving the reopened church? This concern is based on the premise that from history, the Kenyan church is a slow learner and a late adapter. The contemporary Kenyan church responds more to the Western church and the trends there than it does to local dynamics. Slow to learn from local experiences and quick to copy foreign models. This has made the Kenyan church not rise to the occasion in times of local crisis. We have a church that exists for times of peace. In crisis, the Kenyan church makes underwhelming responses. No wonder the agitation from some corners to reopen. To reopen meaning to restore the church's room temperature. I'm afraid that the old church will reopen. I'm afraid that the old church will reopen. I'm afraid that the pastors will pick up from where they left. I'm afraid that the prosperity gospel will be taken a notch higher in a bid to regain financial glory. I pray that the church that reopens would take an honest look at itself through these 6 cardinal questions. Question 1. Why is the church labeled a non-essential service in times of a global crisis? Question 2. Why is it that the church is poor at missional and prophetic innovation? Question number 3. Why do we glorify the sanctuary pulpit over the community pulpit? Question number 4. What will characterize the reassembled church after the scattering experience? Question number 5. How do we begin to prepare ourselves for the next crisis which will happen in the future? Question number 6. Should we have planned scattering once in a while? Unless the church faces these questions and answers them pragmatically, the church that will reopen will remain, in many ways, non-essential. This has been Spotlight. Thank you.